How about the next? There we go. Okay, so the first thing is, what exactly is a lame duck session? And it is, in fact, that time that begins immediately after the November election on even numbered years, and it lasts until the legislature adjourns in December. Another interesting note is that Michigan is one of only 4 states that has a full-time legislature. There are, I think, 7 states where they're in for 80% of the time, and a lot of states the legislature meets for a much shorter time. But in addition to that, there are no limits on how long their session goes, so they can stretch their lame duck session out until like the very last day, December 31st, so that it usually lasts about 7 or 8 weeks. And in that amount of time, they can pass a lot of legislation. Okay, I would like to read 5 statements to you that are preconceived notions and not necessarily true. The first one is that lame duck sessions are all evil. The second one is that lame duck sessions are always used by just one party. Nothing good ever comes from a lame duck session. Lame duck sessions are unconstitutional. And lame duck legislation is pushed through by unethical politicians who can't wait for the chance to skirt the system. Now I'd like to read 5 statements that are true. The first one is that lame duck sessions usually are quite productive. It gives the legislators a chance to tie up loose ends. And even though there are no procedural rules, whoever's in the majority at the time tends to bypass procedure and use some little tactics to get their own agenda pushed through. Bypassing the normal procedures results in a lack of transparency, and it also cuts down on the ability for citizens to give input. And finally, the lack of time for, there's a lack of time for legislators to really study a bill if it's rushed through. Okay, Miriam, could we have our graph, please? Okay, this graph has a lot of information. If you scan your eyes over to the left and look at the vertical axis, it shows the number of bills signed in a year. So you can see that each bar represents a year starting in 1999 and ending in 2018. A legislative session is actually 2 years, an odd year, and then it ends on an even year. So now if we look at the bottom axis, you can see that each even year, starting with 2000, the bars tend to be much taller. It's also, now if you take your eyes all the way over to the right, that vertical axis shows that the blue part at the top represents the bills that were passed just during that 7 weeks of lame duck. And the little gray zigzaggy line near the top, that shows the percentage. So if we look at the year 2002, which was actually the final year of John Engler's 12-year reign, you can see that they passed a lot of bills in that year. It was like almost 750, but about 20% of them happened during the last 7 weeks of his administration. Okay, so now if we look at the years 2003 through 2010, that was Jennifer Granholm's reign, and they passed quite a few laws. The significant proportion of them, especially in 2008, were during the lame duck session. But an interesting thing to notice is that as we scan farther to the left, we move forward in time, the proportion of blue increases. So we're trending toward a situation where the legislators tend to save a lot of work till the end, and then they work like busy beavers getting everything done. Now let's look specifically at the years 2011 through 2018. Those are the years that Rick Snyder was our governor. And what I've read is that starting with 2012 on, a lot of the bills that were passed were in direct opposition to positions that the league holds. And so they were starting to be upset with lame duck sessions. But the coup de grace was 2018, where 50% of all the activity happened just at the end of that 1 year. And this was the year that made the league decide to do the study. So now let's see. The reason that 2018 was so significant was that it was the final year in what's known as a trifecta. And that means that the governor was Republican, the Senate was controlled by Republicans, and the House was controlled by Republicans. I searched and searched and tried to find the last time the Democrats had a trifecta, and I couldn't find it. We might have to go back as far as Soapy Williams. I mean, I couldn't find when it was, but so when there's a trifecta, as you can imagine, that party has a lot of power and they're able to push their own agenda to a large extent. The other thing important about 2018 was that Gretchen Whitmer is looming on the horizon because she had just gotten elected, and 70% of the state senators and 30% of the House reps were leaving office because of term limits. And when that happens and they know they're going to be gone, they don't really have to worry about facing accountability. So that's what happened then. The other thing I wanted to talk about is just a little bit about 2019. When Governor Whitmer took over in 2019, a bipartisan group was formed of 13 Republicans and 13 Democrats, and they introduced Joint Resolution C. And it would have required that the state legislature adjourn before Election Day in November on even numbered years, which would solve the lame duck problem. Then 3 additional joint resolutions were introduced, but of all of those, none of them were approved. And so here we are with our study. And that kind of concludes my whirlwind overview